Chapter 16. Santiago. Santiago sat on his bed, staring blankly at the wall. Though his body had not moved for the last 10 minutes, his mind had been working at the speed of light, trying to understand everything that had happened. The events of the night replayed themselves like a film in his mind. Again, he went through them. He had seen the dark-haired man choking Anya. Angered beyond belief, Santiago had thrown his unopened Gatorade bottle at the man and then charged at him, planning to get him off of Anya at any cost. But then suddenly she appeared in front of him? That was the first thing he didn't understand. How was it that she was being choked 1 second, and then the next second he was staring at her back, her silver hair flowing behind her? How had that happened? Had Santiago missed something? But the more he rehashed the events, the more it seemed like Anya had just teleported to his side. Why had she risked herself that way for him? Instead of feeling flattered, Santiago felt frustration. It was as if she had freed herself from harm's way, only to plunge straight back into danger. Wasn't she scared? He remembered glancing into the man's eyes for just a second as he loomed over Anya's protective shoulder. Santiago was certain that the man had golden eyes, narrow and menacing, reminiscent of a snake poised to strike. The thought alone was enough to send chills down his spine. But despite the coolness that reverberated through his body, Anya's hurt face haunted him, and he buried his hands in his face as if trying to hide the memory. He hadn't meant to snap at Anya after she had just finished protecting him, but he had been so aggravated. Why was she asking if she was okay when Santiago could clearly see how red Anya's neck was from being strangled? It was maddening, the way she coddled him to the point of putting him before herself. He hated that. But then, when she began to throw up, Santiago felt scared. He had never seen Anya sick in all the time he had known her. Santiago himself had experienced the occasional cold at the beginning of the school semester, and had even had food poisoning before. But Anya? It made sense logistically that she could get sick like anyone else, but witnessing it sent a shock through his system. And why was it blood that she was coughing up? It unnerved him. The Anya he knew was always so calm and collected. Watching her heave her guts out on the concrete, he had never seen her like that. So vulnerable. He remembered his abuelo, who had always been so cold to him, rushing to Anya's aid as soon as he told him what was happening. When he reached Anya, he had lifted her silver locks that were falling over her like a curtain and held them in his hand while rubbing her back. Santiago wasn't sure whom he was more jealous of, Anya or his abuelo. He collapsed onto his bed and sighed deeply. He desperately wanted to check on Anya, but his papa had warned him against it. Seems like she's going through a lot right now. It's best you let her come to you when she's ready. The image of fingerprints on Anya's neck, her trembling body as she vomited, her hurt expression when she looked at him, unsettling images he would never be able to forget. He closed his eyes and wondered how today had gone so wrong. When Santiago woke the next morning, he realized he was still in his soccer uniform. He groaned tiredly. What time was it? The sky outside seemed dark, or perhaps it was gray. He couldn't tell. He turned towards his phone and read the time. It was 5 a.m. He groaned again, but now that he had opened his eyes, he felt the urge to take off his uniform, go to the bathroom, and have a glass of water. He went to the bathroom first, then changed into a pair of sweats before dreamily going down the stairs, still feeling the daze of sleep over his eyes. It wasn't until he started to walk back to his room, glass of water in hand, that he thought he saw someone reflected in the hallway mirror. He turned sharply at the figure, the last of the fogginess in his brain lifting as his awareness awakened. Upon closer inspection, he saw that it was the back of a girl's head, a girl with silver hair. Anya, he whispered, surprised, watching the garden sway back gently. What was she doing outside so early in the morning? Wait, had she even slept? Had she been there all night? Without thinking twice, he set his glass down on the table and walked outside. It was only when he was inches behind her, watching her slowly rock back and forth, that he spoke. "Hey," he said softly, so as not to scare her. "Hey," she replied back, unfazed by his presence. "Have you been here all night?" he asked. "Pretty much," she said softly. Santiago put his hands in his hoodie. He was used to Anya's short answers. She was never much of a talker, but something about this morning felt different, as if there was something looming in the air between them, making it difficult to speak. After an awkward silence, broken only by the creak of the chains in the garden swing, he finally asked, "Are you feeling better?" "That's," Anya exhaled, "a complicated question." At her response, Santiago reached out and grabbed the chains of the swing, halting its soft sway. He hoped she would look at him, but instead she kept her gaze fixed ahead. He sat on the opposite side of her, but the bench was so small, leaving only a sliver of space between the two of them. Santiago felt nervous, not only at the proximity, but at the questions in his mind that felt so loaded. If he turned to face her, would she be able to read his mind, observe the lines on his face, and know immediately how anxious he was? Anya had always been too good at perceiving his facial expressions. He didn't want to risk it. Instead, his gaze settled on the lime tree in the distance. He took a deep, quiet breath before asking, "Who was that guy?" "His name is Andres," she said. Her answer almost surprised him. He was sure she would have evaded it, but maybe she was answering his question to avoid a larger one. The image of her being choked against the wall flashed across his mind again. No, a name wasn't enough. Not after what he had witnessed. He needed to know. "Why was he hurting you?" he asked bluntly. At this, Anya took a deep breath. She turned to face him, and Santiago saw how red her eyes were against her pale face, as if she had been crying all night and morning. His fists clenched involuntarily. Seeing her like this caused him internal anguish. He had never seen her cry before, never seen her face with traces of hurt lingering in red-rimmed eyes around her. There was so much he wanted to understand about her, so much that remained a mystery, but at the same time, it meant causing her to shed even one more tear. Santiago would remain in the dark. "You don't have to," he started to say, but Anya caught him off. "I'm going to tell you a story. Maybe by the end, you'll understand," she said. Santiago nodded and listened intently as Anya recounted her past. He had known some of the story already, that his grandfather had found Anya in Romania and taken her in. What he didn't know was that Anya came from a family of elite assassins in Romania, and her family had been murdered by a rivaling organization. When Javier found her, she had been fleeing from her assailants. It was then that Javier had struck a deal with her. He would shelter her, and in return, she would become the Del Toro family's personal bodyguard. "That man, Andres, was looking for your abuelo and me. I'm not sure who sent him, but I'll find out sooner or later. I always do." Her voice held an icy determination in those last words. Santiago sat stunned, trying to comprehend everything that Anya had just told him. It seemed both incredible and ridiculous at the same time, almost as if he was being filmed on one of those punked reality TV shows he'd watch with his friends. It just didn't make any sense. Anya, his friend Anya, came from a family of elite assassins? How was that possible? He took a moment to look at Anya, to really look at her from head to toe. Apart from her beauty, she just looked like any other 16-year-old girl. Tall and lanky. She didn't even look particularly strong or stealthy. He could actually think of plenty other girls who looked sturdier and stronger than Anya did. And yet... He thought back to all the years he had spent with Anya, recalling the times he had overheard his abuelo and his father say in passing, "Anya will take care of it," or, "If Anya's there, it will be fine," and finally, "Send Anya." Often after hearing those phrases, Anya would return from her errands with his father or abuelo, sometimes limping or with her arm in a sling. It wasn't frequent, maybe once every 6 months, but Santiago never forgot those injuries. Was she truly the Del Toro family's bodyguard? Did Anya sustain those injuries while protecting his father and grandfather? The idea was unsettling. After all, she wasn't much older than he was. and much more delicate. No, this was impossible. You don't have to lie, he snapped. I'm not a child that you have to tell stories to. Why would my family even need a bodyguard? Anya raised an eyebrow at him. Perhaps you are more of a child than I thought, if you haven't noticed the position your abuelo holds in this city. Her words stung Santiago like a slap in the face. Perhaps you are more of a child than I thought? Her words echoed in his mind, and he was so insulted and speechless that he couldn't think of anything to say. Anya didn't wait for him either, and began to roll up her pant leg. What are you doing? Santiago exclaimed, feeling frustrated and angry all at once. His eyes widened as he saw Anya take out a small dagger from the side of her leg, and then another from her other leg. I saw you looking at that lime tree earlier. Shall I cut one down for you? She asked. He barely had a moment to register her words before she said, Watch closely now. Without another word, Santiago watched in astonishment as Anya threw the first knife, followed swiftly by the second. The first dagger severed a thin branch that was holding a single lime, and the second pierced the falling lime against the tree. Santiago's jaw dropped in shock. He was so absorbed in what he had just witnessed that he didn't even notice when Anya sat back down, her lips close to his ear. Do you believe me now? She whispered softly. Santiago's heart pounded like thunder as a tingle ran through his whole body. He turned his head towards Anya, and suddenly their faces were only inches apart, his golden brown eyes staring into her emerald ones, their noses almost touching. He tried not to look at her soft pink lips, tried not to imagine what it would be like to press his own lips against hers, but she was so close. She smelled like warm vanilla, and he swore he could feel the exhale of her breath against his lips. Santiago had been wanting to kiss her since the first time he saw her, and which is why I will be attending school with you, starting next week. The sudden statement snapped Santiago back to reality, and he backed away from Anya. Wait, what? He asked, feeling like he had missed a very important piece of information. Andres is a very skilled assassin, and I have a feeling he finds my bond with you and your family amusing. He'll want to exploit it, Anya explained, and then her expression turned serious. Ernesto and Javier have security detail with them wherever they go, but you... She moved closer to him, her body pressing up against his shoulder, her porcelain hand grabbing a stray blonde hair from his face and tucking it back behind his ear. He felt a tingle go up against his spine as he met her jeweled eyes. You need protection, she breathed, then turned her face away, her tone growing somber. I'm sure you'll remember the way he looked at you. Santiago did remember. He didn't think he could ever truly forget. And though that encounter made him nervous, he wasn't sure what he wanted. He wasn't sure he wanted Anya to start attending school with him. He recalled how the soccer team called out to Anya and felt a prickle of annoyance crawl up his neck. Anya yawned and then got up before Santiago even had a chance to protest. I'm going to sleep. I think I've done too much thinking for one night. Get my knives, will you? She winked. Hold on, Santiago said, worried his final questions would go unanswered, but she turned to him, waiting for him to ask. Why did that guy call you a princess? And who is Adriana? At this, Anya gave Santiago the saddest smile. Adriana was my older sister. She was the successor, which is why she was called a princess. But, like I told you, she was murdered, along with the rest of my family. We had similar features, so he probably mistook her for me. So then, if she was in line for succession, and she passed away, does that mean you would have been the one to succeed her? He pressed, feeling a twinge of guilt for prying, but understanding her was a need that coursed through his veins. At this final question, Anya turned away from him, as though she didn't want him to see her face. Her voice cold as she said, No, I was never in line to succeed. What a loaded answer, Santiago thought, but he didn't pry any further. Instead, he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I'm sorry, he said, for thinking you were lying and for your... He trailed off, not sure how to convey his empathy for losing her entire family in one night. Anya didn't let him figure it out. No, it's okay, she said rapidly. It happened a really long time ago now. Anyways, I've got to get to bed. We'll talk later, okay? Okay, Santiago nodded, and as he watched her walk inside, he wondered what other secrets she was keeping hidden from him.